Good morning, everyone. I think I've got things set up here to where we can begin. Good morning. Welcome to our legislative issue update this morning from Nebraska Farm Bureau. My name is Jay Ferris, Director of Grassroots Programs for Nebraska Farm Bureau. Again, welcome. Want to kind of go over just a couple of things before we begin this morning. We're going to run this much the same that we've done in the past. We will have some presentation here on some legislative update, both in what's going on in Lincoln and Washington, D.C. There is an opportunity for each of you to ask questions as we go along. There's two ways you can do that. One is there is a chat function or a question function that you can type your question in. I will see that and I can read that off to the presenter, ask them the question, they can answer that. The other option is if you have a microphone on your computer, you can simply click on the raise your hand button. I will see that and I can unmute your microphone to where you can ask the question directly. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have a special guest joining us this morning that we're going to let him kick off, but we have Senator Ken Shields, who represents District 47, which is part of the Panhandle and Ogallala West area. So, Senator Shields, welcome.
Good morning, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we are very glad that you are able to be on. We are looking for a perspective from you on some of the things you're working on and what's happening in the session this year.
Great. You want me to explain what's going on right now?
Yep, I will go ahead and switch the slide here to the next one, maybe. Yeah. There we are.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone, and good morning. A little chilly here in Lincoln, but it's good to be on here. I see that we've got a few of my bills that I've introduced this year. And if we just want to run down the list of what each one of those are, LB 175, call it the Livestock Growth Act, and basically what it does is it starts to look at livestock development in the state of Nebraska much the same way that the Department of Economic Development looks at how they recruit and how they go about figuring out siting and all that kind of stuff. What LB 175 will do is it will encourage much the same, and I look at it as one of those opportunities for Nebraska. When we look at economic development and how that's done in the state, there's what's called economic development certified communities, and those out there, if you qualify for that and you go through all the steps and the hoops to be ready and qualified for that, then you get extra tools that other counties or other cities don't get, and that's because the state of Nebraska wants to make sure that when they're putting money into economic development, that they're putting money and they're putting the best face forward to make sure that they have the best opportunity to be successful. And so what 175 would do would be the same kind of thing that they do with the economic development certified community. They would do some of the similar things with livestock friendly designation. And that will greatly enhance the ability of those counties to be able to bring development in. It asks the counties to look over their strategic plans, their zoning, and things like that to make sure that it's all the way it needs to be. And then it also encourages them to go find where. First of all, let me back up. First of all, find out what exactly is desirable for livestock expansion in the county, and then where that expansion should occur, and that step alone will make it much simpler and much better, much easier for both the county and the people that are trying to place livestock facilities within there. Then it also has some other benefits for folks, producers, and other folks that need to get technology and things like that within their systems, and there's some grant money there for those kind of things. So working on that. Obviously, LB 176 is an attempt to look at the possibility of being able to have processors own swine in the state of Nebraska. Right now, there's 3 packing plants in the state, have over 5,000 jobs, that people in jobs that are there. We want to make sure we protect that, while at the same time protecting the ability and giving Nebraska the opportunity to change with the times in the swine market. And what we see is about 70% of all swine in the United States are under some sort of production contract. That number is not going down; it's continually moving upwards. And we look at the ban on that in Nebraska as a hindrance of that changing industry to grow. And there are, not being in a perfect world, there's some challenges that come with that, but I also think the opportunities outweigh those. And so both those 2 bills are out on the floor right now, but we don't know when they'll be debated. We're working on priorities, and we'll have to figure out whether or not either of those 2 bills can be. The next one, LB 395, is truly, it's another economic development bill, and what it is it's a deal closing fund that about 40 other states in the nation have. Nebraska does not yet. What it would do is that if you've got a company that wants to come in, and they want to, and Nebraska is recruiting them. What this does is this gives a panel of 9 people, all volunteers, the opportunity to sit down and look at which businesses they think need just that little extra something to get them here, and then they can use some cash to do that. It's been successfully used in places like Louisiana, in places like Texas, as well as others, and there's some pretty hefty companies here in Nebraska that can benefit from that as well. Nucor out of Norfolk, Cabela's out of Sydney said they were very interested in it, and so as well as others. And I look at this not only for large manufacturing type businesses or retail businesses, but also for ag ventures as well. And where I see this working out and becoming very important is on the dairy side, not necessarily for the production end, but for the processing side. And it will give us an opportunity to place some of that processing that we could really use here in Nebraska to help grow that industry. So we're looking forward to that. That comes up for hearing next Tuesday. And then the last one on the list here is LB 329, and that's the Agritourism Promotion Act. And basically what that does is it's a recreational liability bill that would give landowners the opportunity to shed some of their liability when allowing folks to enter their property to recreate, which could include hunting, fishing, bird watching, strawberry picking, touring vineyards, all this kind of stuff would enter into that. And there was a study that was done about 4 years ago that I sponsored, and this was one of the main initiatives of that study to help our tourism industry in Nebraska, while at the same time helping our main industry, which is agriculture. So I'm trying not to let those plans just sit on a shelf and get dusty. We're trying to get those things that the plan called for implemented. And 329 comes up for hearing today in the Natural Resources Committee, and hopefully we'll be able to get that one out to the floor as well. Anything else, Jay?
No, I thank you for that update. I guess overall, how is the session going, in your opinion, to this point?
The session isn't going too badly. We've, with 18 new senators, new administration, and the new governor, new attorney general down the line, we've done pretty well. I think Senator Hadley, as Speaker, has managed things decently well. I think that overall we haven't hit too many of the big issues yet. Those are still to come. Obviously, Senator Chambers, walks to the beat of his own drum and does his own thing. So you never know when that powder keg is going to blow. But and I don't know what else to call it. But overall, I think the session is going well. I think I think that people are genuinely interested in looking at how to fix property tax issues. I think that they understand that it can't just be throwing money back at it. We have to do some things moving forward that actually grow our economy to make it to build that base, so that we aren't stuck, fewer and fewer of us paying more and more all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a very good point. And I will say, or also let our audience know this as well too, that now is a great time. If you have a question for Senator Schills, feel free to raise your hand. We will turn your mic on where you can ask that question, or certainly type in your question in the question box, and we will get that asked. So,
hey, Jay Ferris?
Yes.
This is Jay Rimpey. Can I ask a quick question?
You can sure go ahead.
Senator, I just real quick, I know you're chair of the Natural Resources Committee. Any thoughts and comments on things happening in front of the Natural Resources Committee this session?
Sure. Thanks, Jay. Yes, and we've had some things going on this year, although not quite as interesting as last year with all of the water issues and the water bills and the funding bills that we had. But this year, the main thrust is looking at energy in Nebraska and how it all fits together. And so I've introduced a long-term energy plan bill that would take a look at everything out there that is energy as far as the state of Nebraska. And when we start talking about it, obviously we've got a public power system, which is one big part of it. And with the new CO2 regulations that are coming down, or will soon be coming down, we have to figure out what that means for us and what the best way forward is to make sure that we can either get those changed to a level that makes sense, or try to deal with them as best we can. But secondly, it's about a lot of other things as well. Natural gas in the state of Nebraska, oil in the state of Nebraska, ethanol in the state of Nebraska, and how each one of those is intertwined with the other industries that we have around. And if you take ethanol and just look at that itself, I mean, all of a sudden now we've got major sectors of our ag economy, namely corn growers and cattle feeders, that now are inextricably combined and involved in energy in Nebraska. And those are some of the things that, as you extrapolate this plan out, how do we best move that forward? And then on other issues, how do we look to the future to figure out if there's barriers to some of these opportunities that we may have, and try to alleviate those before the opportunity disappears. And I think that we've seen that a couple opportunities that we may have had early on in Nebraska that really didn't catch on, really weren't able to do anything, and by the time we figured out what was going on, the opportunities were gone. So that's another part of this plan. So that's going on. We'll probably combine it with the bill that Senator Smith put in to talk about the CO2 regulations. I look at his bill as being the first thing that needs to be done, because we have to make sure that by 2016 we have a plan, and then by 2020 that we've implemented the changes to make up for that CO2 issue and regulations. The other things that we're working on, obviously, once again, we're having to deal with the mountain lion issue. Senator Chambers has introduced it again, and he came to the committee, and of course he's threatening all sorts of things. If it doesn't get out of committee, he'll try to attach it to every one of my bills. I guess we'll see what happens, and we'll see how that goes. But I think the committee, and we haven't done any. We'll have an exec session here on next Tuesday over that, and we'll probably talk about it actually tonight after our hearing. But I don't know where the committee is, but I can tell you that Senator Chambers will get a vote on that. That's one thing that I've always told my committee and anybody that introduces a bill, is that if you want a vote, or if you want to try to get something going, we'll take the vote. So he will get a vote on that. And then other than that, we're doing a few things for the NRDs to clean up some legislation and give them some of the tools that they need out there. Nothing nothing earth-shattering or anything like that. We will have a bill coming up to provide bonding authority to the NRDs here in the future. Senator Kolowski has introduced that bill. That should bring some interesting debate. I know that there's folks on either side of that issue, and all with good, valid reasons why they're there. So we'll see how that goes. We did have a bill introduced by Senator Davis to provide standing for certain political subdivisions and interests on some water rights stuff, and that bill is continued to be worked on. Nobody has come to consensus on the proper way to do that, so we're still in conversations on that. And with that, I think the other thing I guess is that we did have the opportunity to put the new folks and to vote on the new folks to go on the Natural Resources Commission, the new Natural Resources Commission. So I think we've gone through all those. I think that they're all in place now, and I think that's going to be interesting to see how that comes up. We should be getting ready to see the final rules and regulations on how the dollars are going to be spent moving forward for the Sustainability Fund. And connecting onto that, we did have one more water issue, water funding issue, and that's those projects that have been sitting out there that the NRDs did, which the Resource Development Fund ran out of money on, and they're sitting there. They need about $18 million. So we're working with the Appropriations Committee, working with Senator Watermeyer to find a solution to that. And I think we're pretty close. And I believe that if it works out the way it looks like it's working out today, everyone around the table should be happy. So I'm pleased with how things are going. We're just about done with hearings. We've got one more week left, so 3 more days of hearings, and then the Natural Resources Committee will be done with all their work.
Okay. Well, is there any questions? I'm not seeing any questions to this point, but if you do have a question, please feel free to type that in or raise your hand. We can certainly take those questions at this time.
Maybe I put them all to sleep.
You just answered all their questions. So, well, I guess at this time, Senator, you're welcome to stay on the webinar if you would like. And or if you need to go, we certainly understand that as well.
Sure.
So,
well, Jay, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was good to get on here, and really, if anybody has any questions on any issue, feel free to contact our office here in Lincoln, and we would be happy to help out however we can. But thank you very much. Thanks to the Farm Bureau for giving me this opportunity, and good luck with the rest of your day.
Okay. Thanks, Senator. Okay. Well, moving along, we will go. We also have, as you heard before, Jay Rempe is with us this morning, and so we will move on to more of Farm Bureau's perspective on some of the bills that are going on. So, Jay, I will let you take over.
All right, thank you, Jay, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. And we certainly appreciate Senator Schill's willingness to jump on for a little while and share his insights on the session this year. Senator's time is very valuable, and we certainly appreciate that. Let me, real quick, I'll just kind of set the stage for those of you that haven't been on before or haven't participated in one of these, but we did have, actually the number came out to be a little over 660 bills introduced this year that included appropriations bills. As Senator Schills alluded to, every one of those bills gets assigned to a committee. They started committee hearings the 3rd week in January, and they are starting to finish up some of those hearings right now. Farm Bureau has been very active in a lot of bills in committee and testifying and having members come in. I think every week, at a minimum, we'll be up on about 4 or 5 bills, and oftentimes it's a little more. So, Jay, you can go to the next slide. Obviously, one of the things that is top of our list right now that we're working on for a priority issue for this session is property taxes. I probably don't need to tell the people that are on this webinar the problem. Here's some information we've been sharing with senators in the legislature, letting them know what the problem is. But you can see since 2004, ag land taxes have increased by 162%. Just this last year, overall statewide, there was a 16% growth on ag land taxes. And if you look at the overall total growth in the state on property taxes, 88% of that growth was on ag land. So that means very minimal, like 12% of that growth is attributable to commercial properties, residential properties, and other property sectors. So most of the growth in taxes is on ag land. And we set a record this last year for the first time ever. Taxes on ag land totaled over $1 billion. And when you look at a total property tax bill of around $3.5 billion, the fact that we're paying $1 billion of that on ag land is not good. So Jay, you can go to the next slide. So early on, Farm Bureau came out with what we called was our foundation for tax relief. There are kind of four pillars, if you will, to that foundation. And these are all designed to kind of work together to try to provide some property tax relief, particularly for farmers and ranchers, but for all property taxpayers in the state. The first key to this is reducing ag land value. We had a couple different bills introduced to do that. One was LB 178 to reduce it down for schools only by to 55% from the present level of 75%. The other was Senator Brosh's that reduced it for all local entities, the taxable value down to 65%. We've calculated that dropping it to 65%, farmers and ranchers would save between $80 to $100 million statewide, depending, and that would even account for a property tax levy shift. If you assume local governments raise their levies to make up for the drop, even with that, farmers and ranchers would save $80 to $100 million. It's direct relief, and then it's shift to better balance. And because what we've seen is, I just pointed out, 88% of the growth in property taxes last year was on ag land. So that's shifting off of other property sectors onto ag land. This would help shift it back. Next, Jay. The other part of what we're working on is more money in the property tax credit program. That program was started in 2007. It totals about $140 million right now. When you get your property tax bill, you should see an amount due, and then it should show less a credit, and then a net amount due. So that's direct relief to you as a property taxpayer. We're working with Senator Wannemeyer to try to increase that amount by $60 million to go up to $200 million. Our calculations show that if we can do that, farmers and ranchers would save about $76 million total in the state if we can get that amount up to $200 million. We've had some good luck there. The Appropriations Committee, in their preliminary budget, has designated $45 million for that program. We went in just last week and testified in front of the Appropriations Committee asking them to bump that up to $60 million. I think there's some interest in that from the committee, but of course they're trying to balance that request with all the other different things that are out there, people seeking money. And I should have mentioned on the ag land value bills, those hearings were held 2 or 3 weeks ago. The Revenue Committee has not taken any actions on those bills. They're holding those to kind of wait and get through the hearing process, and then they're going to talk about what they can kind of try to put together into a package. And to be honest, we're competing with a lot of different ideas out there for property tax relief. We're also competing with ideas. There are senators that want income tax relief. So we've got our job cut out for us working with the Revenue Committee to try to make that all work. Jay? The last part of our foundation, if you will, is, and I think Senator Schills brought this up earlier, but we've got to look at state aid to K-12 schools and how we provide state aid and fund schools. Right now, there are nearly 2/3 of our school districts across the state do not receive any form of state equalization aid, and that's because of the high ag land values. and well, a combination of the high ag land values and either stagnant or declining student numbers. So we've been advocating for a lot of different ways to try to provide some state aid to rural schools. One bill that we had introduced would return a portion of the income taxes collected in that school district back to that school. These are state income tax dollars going back to that school. We've advocated for some changes in the state aid formula that would remove penalties that rural schools get hit with because their levies are too low. We've also talked about foundation aid, where every school district gets a certain amount of state aid, a guaranteed aid per student. Right now, as we sit here, the Education Committee is very divided. I would be very surprised if they come out with any major reforms this session. I think where they're heading toward is some kind of a study, is where the direction seems to be, and kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, if you will. But that's still out there. Several bills have been put in play in that area. So, go ahead, Jay. And then I also want to mention we've been working very closely with Governor Ricketts on a lot of what we've been talking about. He supports reducing the ag land values to 65%. The one difference we have with him, he would like to phase that in over 3 years. We want to try to do it all in 1 year. He included in his budget $60 million a year increase like we're asking for, and so that's $120 million over the next 2 years, which we believe is good. And we're certainly working with him on that as well. The other thing that's out there a little bit, there's some interest level in trying to somehow restrain changes in the value from year to year, and try to prevent that double-digit growth, to try to get it, keep it from getting worse. There's nothing that's been thrown out there yet. There's a lot of work behind the scenes on trying to do something in that area. And that might be a concept that gets kind of thrown in here in the next few weeks as senators discuss property taxes. All right, Jay. I just threw this in here just to let you know some of the key committees that we're working with on some of these issues. The two key ones probably right now are the Revenue Committee, and you can see the membership there. Chairman Glore, or Senator Glore, chairs that committee. Right now, they are not gelling around any idea. There's been some discussions behind the scene. As I said, they're waiting until the end of hearings, and we'll kind of see. But there's some strong personalities on that committee, and they all have different ideas of how we should move forward. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. And then you can see the Appropriations Committee and some of the members there. And that's a pretty good mix of folks there as well. And they're just getting started in their process of hearings, the budget bills. They have to have the budget out by April, middle of April. So that'll be their timeline on doing some things. And Jay, I think I'll let you talk a little bit here.
Okay. Yeah, there are. This is something that we, whenever we find out if a senator is having town hall meetings in your area, we try to get those out. Senator Shills, I know, is leftist now, but I know he will do some in the Ogallala area and others. And then we're also aware that there are some senators. Senator Hughes does some telephone town halls, conference calls, and please contact their office to get onto those. But in addition to that, we're also wanting to talk a lot about our initiatives and our plans with the property tax. We did one set of town hall meetings earlier, well, towards the end of January. We have another set scheduled for April, and that's going to be April 6th and 7th. So stay tuned for the exact details on those. But President Steve Nelson will be traveling, meeting with Farm Bureau members to talk about our property tax plan. And where we're planning on going on this next trip is we'll be kind of covering the northeast and north central and central part of the state. We're going to start on Monday, April 6th, go through Wahoo, West Point, Norfolk, and then start on the 7th in Valentine, come down to Ord, and then into Columbus. And we're also going to be hitting a lot of media stops that day as well. So we'll get the exact details for those. So if we're in your area, please come out and stop by. in addition to that, in other areas where we need your help on property tax issues and the other issues we're working on, and that is with our action alerts. When we send out those action alerts, we do need you to take action on that and communicate your feelings to your senator or to the committees we're sending those out. Our last one was on the property tax credit program. Went to Appropriations Committee, and we had a great response on that. And that one is actually going to be taken down, and we're going to replace that with just encouraging you to contact your state senator, let them know that we need to get something done on property taxes this year. And it's going to be kind of generic because, Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so far there's been nothing pushed out of committee on any of the tax plans yet. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay. So at this point, we just need to get something moving to where it comes out of committee to where it can be addressed on the floor. So that's what we're going to be asking in our next action alert here, is to be encouraging your state senator to encourage something gets done on the property tax issue. So Jay, I'll let you go back. Or we might have lost Jay.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
All right, just real quick, I just want to finish up with one of the constraints that we're facing in this whole tax. Oh, sorry. One of the constraints that we're facing in terms of some of these tax discussions is the state budget. And so I just wanted to finish off real quick. And one of if the senators do nothing else this session, the only thing that they're constitutionally required to do is set a budget. And so I mentioned the discussions of the Appropriations Committee and their preliminary budget earlier. That's the only thing that they're required, and they're required to balance that budget. Right now, they have a cash reserve of around $760 million, which that's over and above. They're required at a minimum to keep 3%, so that cash reserve is over and above the 3%. But there's a lot of hesitancy on the part of the senators, as well as to some respect the governor, to tap into that. They want to try to keep it for a rainy day. That's what it's there for. They do look at it occasionally for some one-time capital expenses like buildings and that kind of thing. But they're looking at tapping into it a little bit, but they're trying to protect that as much as they can. So coming out of the preliminary budget discussion, the Appropriations Committee left what they felt was about $50 million for the rest of the legislature to play with, if you will, to provide tax relief or any other new spending items that state senators may want to do. Last week, the Tax Forecasting Board met, or Revenue Forecasting Board, and its preliminary forecast said that they thought that the revenue forecast were going to drop about $9 million. So that dropped that $50 million down to around $40 million to work with. Now, the final numbers from both the budget and the Revenue Forecasting Board will come out in April, so that could change. Here's the issue. I talked about ag land values earlier. The fiscal note on that, it's been scored as costing the state an additional $30 million in state aid, because when you reduce ag land values, that makes rural school districts look less wealthy in the formula. It pumps more state aid out to rural Nebraska. So that's just one idea. Well, that takes up 3/4 of that $40 million. Of course, people have other ideas of what there's some thought about trying to reduce personal property taxes. I mentioned income taxes. So, and then there's some other spending items out there. They've been talking about tweaking Medicaid in some ways to provide some more assistance to the low-income people. That costs money. So all those things are competing for that $40 or $50 million, and that's what one of the constraints that we're working in right now in looking at some of these tax relief ideas and some of the other things that we've been talking about. So I just wanted to share that with everybody and finish that. That's kind of the ballpark or the framework that senators are looking at as they're having this discussion around property tax relief. And I think, Jay, that was our last slide of the morning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions right now.
Okay, yeah, that is the last slide. We do have a couple of questions. One, and I think you may have answered this already, but I guess, and it's kind of going, and I'll add to it a little bit, but direct question was, anything happened on Senator Al Davis's bill to have a local county income tax tied to lowering property taxes? But I'll add to that, and of the tax plans and what you're hearing, what seems to be gaining some of the most traction, or what's your thoughts on, at this point, what we're going to see on that?
Well, let me start with Senator Davis's bill. As a package, in what he's attempting to do with pairing an increase in the local income tax with some increased state aid to schools and reducing the levies there, I don't see much momentum around that. The local income tax idea has caught a lot of heat from a couple different angles. One is, I mentioned earlier, there's senators interested in reducing state income tax rates, and when they start putting that local income tax on top of the state income tax, because the local income tax in his bill would be 19% of your state liability, and it gives the local school board an opportunity to go up to 29%. When you add those on, it would make Nebraska have the highest income tax rates around, and so that's running into a lot of tough sledding. There is an element in that bill, though, that there seems to be a little bit of discussion around, or some interest in, and that's the idea of, in that bill, it included a quote foundation aid where every student or every school district across the state got $500 per student, and there seems to be that part of that bill is at least there's some discussion generated around that. As far as what's got momentum right now, there's nothing really gelling at this point. Within the committee, there seems to be a couple senators that are interested in personal property taxes. There are a couple senators that are interested in reducing ag land values. There are a couple senators that want to reduce income taxes. And then there are a couple senators that kind of like the Al Davis approach, and he's one of them, and Kate Sullivan, that want to have this wholesale reform, increase income taxes and direct the dollars to state aid and reduce property taxes. So as I said here today, nothing really seems to be gelling yet, but I think that'll change over the next 2 weeks, because that's when the discussions will start getting serious, and I imagine the governor will start weighing in and trying to help guide the discussion as well.
Okay. Another question that came in, and this was just any thoughts on the watershed bill or wells?
I guess I'm not sure what that's referencing to.
Okay.
In terms of that, there's the bill to provide some additional funding for some of the projects that the NRDs had done in certain watersheds where they'd already been approved for some state funding, but the state funding hadn't come through yet. But whoever asked that question, if they could get a little more specific, I'd be glad to try to answer it. So.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Not seeing any, so I think we, at this point, I know, Jay, you're planning on sticking around for a little bit, if I am correct?
Yeah. Yep, you're correct.
Okay, then I think we will go on. Oh, here we go. This question, it's the disposal well in Sioux County, and it's the Stinner bill.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, I'm not sure where things are at on that. I think that the hearing is the hearing is scheduled for next week, if I remember correctly, and there hadn't been a whole lot of discussion around it in terms of the bill and what it seeks to do. And if I recall correctly, and I'm testing my memory here, but it seeks to place a charge or a fee on that operation or those kind of projects to help provide for monitoring and some other things to make sure that there's no problems with groundwater quality. And but as of now, I'm not sure what's going to happen on that bill.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we will go ahead and, again, if there's any other questions, please feel free to raise your hand. We can unmute your microphone, or you can certainly type your question into the question box, and we can get those questions asked. I'm trying to switch the screen over to Jordan, and because we're going to let Jordan go. As soon as Jordan accepts that, we'll see his screen. There we are. And Jordan, are you there? Have I unmuted? There.
I am.
Okay.
If everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
All right, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and it's always good to talk to you all. I'm going to run through a couple issues here very quickly, and then always, if you have questions on these or any other issues, please don't hesitate to let me know. I wanted to start off with a couple things. A lot of what I've been doing, a lot of what we've been focused on for a while has been Farm Bill implementation. You know, we passed the Farm Bill last February. We were able to get this thing done. Now it's time to implement it. Now it's time to talk to farmers about what to do, what programs look like, what programs are their best options, so on and so forth. So we've done a lot in the way of statewide educational programs, sponsoring statewide educational programs. We teamed up with the University of Nebraska Extension as well as the Farm Service Agency and helped sponsor those Farm Bill programs that a number of your state or your county, excuse me, FSA folks put on. They were a little confusing as I traveled around the state talking to people. The FSA and UNL folks did a really good job of explaining every single aspect of every single program, and it got folks probably on a little bit of information overload. And so as I was hearing this, one of the things that we kicked off and one of the things we decided to do was try to help walk people through the Farm Bill decision-making tools that were available through Texas A&M mostly, but then also the University of Illinois. These are decision-making tools that for the first time the folks in Congress put in some money for Farm Bill implementation, Farm Bill education to build these tools, and so we unveiled this. And if you didn't know that we were doing it, that's all right. We tried to let as many folks know as we could. We worked through our insurance partners and really tried to spread the word that we were doing this, but I did hear from some folks that not everyone knew we were doing that, but we tried to make sure we educated as many folks as we could. Throughout about 2 months of the program, we worked with dozens really of members across the state from over 20 counties at least, and we still are continuing the program. What these programs do is they allow you to punch your farm bill your farm information into these tools, your base acre information from FSA, your counter-cyclical yields that are available from FSA, and then also your cropping history, and then it gives you an idea of what types of programs you could look at, whether or not it'd be a good idea to update your base, update your yield, some of those types of things. And as we had a person in central Nebraska doing this for us that we contracted with, as well as myself, and so we entered a number of these folks, and as I ran through, I think I ran around 20 plus farms through the system, and as I did that, there were a lot of patterns that popped up. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've seen. So we asked for, as you all probably know, there was a deadline to update your base acres and your yields. That deadline was the end of February. That was extended. We asked for an extension, and the Secretary granted it. An extension of that through the end of March, when the other Farm Bill decision, the program decisions, needed to be made. And so you still have some time to analyze some things. And so as you're looking through, if you feel good about your decision, great. You could probably tune out for the next couple minutes. But I wanted some things as I've entered in Farm Bill information for folks. And again, I do this and I say this not as trying to push you one way or another. Our idea is to try to educate folks, try to help you come up with what is a good option for you. And there were 5 things that popped into my mind very clearly as we walked through these programs. We were entering folks' information in. And the first one is that yield updates are normally a good thing, but not always, not in every situation. You know, updating your yields, it only affects you if you sign up for the PLC program, the price loss program, the updated target price program. That's the only program that yields come into play. However, we don't know what the next farm bill looks like. We don't know what yields, what that information will be used for. And so if you have the opportunity to update your yields to a higher number, it's normally a good idea to do so. But once you plug in your numbers, make sure you work through the sheets. Make sure you kind of you work through the years in which it asks for. I believe it's 09 through 2012. One of them's 09 to 12. One of them's 08 to 12. So if I get the two confused, I apologize right away there. But once you have the opportunity, if you have the opportunity, which you do now, to update your yields, plug in, average out what you've had for corn yields, what you've had for soybean yields, what you've had for wheat yields. Look and see what those numbers are, and see if that would be it would be beneficial to you to update your countercyclical yields for the county. Again, it doesn't affect you if you sign up for the ARC County program, only if you sign up for the PLC program. But if you have the opportunity, it's a good idea. Unless it isn't, unless your average yields are not higher than what your countercyclical yields are. So it's always important. It's a good idea to look at the yield updates. It's normally a good thing, but not always. So run through the numbers and make sure it's a good idea. You really wouldn't lower them. You would just pick the higher of the two. So just make sure you look and kind of calculate out to see what your numbers look like. Number 2, don't always assume right away that updating your base acres is automatically a good decision. You know, different programs pay well under different commodities than others. And we can, the next 2 points kind of get into that, but don't automatically assume that updating your base to what you have been planting from 2009 or 8, excuse me, from 2008 through 2012, that don't automatically assume that it's a good idea. If you have really heavy corn base, that's what you've had, and updating your base would give you more soybean base than what you had for corn if you're on a 50-50 rotation. I would say to think about that a little bit before you jump in and automatically update that in terms of how you'd like to manage your farm payments. There are certain commodities that pay better under certain programs, and so don't automatically assume that updating to what you grow today is going to be a good idea. Now, if you're up in northeast Nebraska or in some other parts of the state where you still have some barley base, I have run into some fields that still had some barley base and some oat base. Barley base and oat base don't pay very well at all under any program, and so that maybe would be a good idea to lose those base acres. But in terms of kind of messing around with your corn, soybean, wheat base acres, if you've got some grain sorghum, that's another one. If you've got some milo base, there's some changing around there that could potentially lower your payments, could possibly bring up some questions as to where your payments would be and how much you'd receive if you change things. You haven't grown milo for 15 years, 10 years, whatever it is, but you still have a majority milo base. Don't automatically assume it's a good idea to get rid of that. So kind of work through some of the program options, think through that a little bit before you decide to update that. And that kind of leads us into the next part on the actual programs themselves. Once you figure out your yield update, once you figure out your base acre decision, the program decisions are pretty easy. ARC County is one of the program options you have. You have a choice between 3 of them: ARC County, PLC, or ARC Individual. I'll start with ARC County. ARC County pays early, and it will likely pay well for the first 2 years. It's kind of your bullish option. If you think prices are headed up, or at least are going to stay where they're at right now, the ARC County program looks at what you've had for an average revenue back from 2009 through 2013. It's an Olympic average. It drops out the high and the low, and so your high revenue year is going to be 2012. You drop that one out. Your low revenue year, it's either going to be 2010 or 2009. You drop that one out. And so when you're comparing 2014's revenue to the revenue that you've received over the past 3 years before that, the ones that you didn't kick out, you're probably going to see a payment triggered under Ark County, and it's likely going to pay fairly well. Really, on average, on the state, it kind of depends. Payments anywhere from $50 to $80 an acre, depending upon where you're at, is what we've seen in terms of what estimates are at, depending upon where you're at. So that's something to keep in mind. However, revenue programs, which is what the Ark County, Ark County, Ark individual programs are, the revenue programs, on years where prices, if we go into a trend where prices stay flat or even decrease, revenue catches up to you. So for 2014, the crop we just took out a couple months ago, your payment is based upon comparing your revenue of 14 through 2013 through 2008. We're going to update that, or 2009, excuse me. We move forward. We're going to drop 2009 out, and then we're going to enter 2014 in. So your low revenue year is going to be 2014. You drop that out. Your high revenue year is still going to be 2012. You drop that one out. And so again, you're comparing basically the same. If you think prices are going to stay roughly where they're at in 2015, you're comparing 15 to roughly the same years that you compared your 14 prices to, your 14 revenue to. So there's probably a good chance we're going to see an Ark County payment in 2015 for the 2015 crops as well. Again, remember that payments won't be issued on any of these programs until October of the year after you've harvested. So the 2014 payment will be issued in October of 2015. The 15 payment will be offered in October of 2016, so on and so forth. So the first 2 years of Ark County, we have a chance for it'll pay, and it'll probably pay fairly well. But when you get into year 3, 4, and 5, if we think prices are either going to stay the same or go up, there's probably a very good chance that we won't receive any Ark County payments, because eventually, like I said, revenue programs catch up to you. It's, again, more of your bullish option. Dropping down into the price loss program, the price loss program, as a reminder, only pays if prices decrease. The target price for corn is $3.70, which, 2-3 years ago we would have thought that the world was going to be on fire if corn was going to hit $3.70, and that's more of a reality than what it was a few years ago. But if you think that prices are going to decrease or stay fairly low, PLC is the option you probably should take a look at. It's your bearish option. If you think really that prices will be lower than the $3.70 target price for corn, if they'll be lower than the $3.90 target price for milo, if they'll be lower than the prices that they've selected for soybeans, and I can't think of that number right off the top of my head right now. But if you think prices are going to decrease, then PLC is the direction maybe to take a look at. For wheat is a pretty strong PLC commodity. Wheat doesn't pay that terribly well in any circumstance under Ark County. PLC seems to be a good option for wheat. Corn seems to be a little bit better on Ark County. Soybeans good on Ark County. Milos is a little bit more of a PLC crop. They put the target price on milo, as I said, at $3.90 or $3.95. So it's a higher target price. It's something to take a look at there on that front. But those are the kind of your two options there. It's something to think about. You always, when you estimate what programs you want to sign up for, it's important to look at how you want these to fit into your risk management scheme. Ark County pays early. It'll probably pay pretty well early the first 2 years, but you have to understand that there's a very good chance you won't receive anything after year 2. PLC is kind of a spreading your risk out year after year after year, depending upon what prices do. If prices go up above that target price level, you won't receive anything, but if prices decrease, that's kind of a constant payment, if you will. If prices stay low, you could receive a payment every single year, but that's only if prices stay low or go lower than where they're at today. So those are the two programs I think are good to keep in mind. I will say the last point here, number 5, take what I say with a grain of salt. In most instances, in a vast majority of instances in the state of Nebraska, don't waste your time worrying about if Ark Individual makes sense for you, because it wasn't written for Nebraska. unless you really, really want to dig into it, it's a very different program than Ark County. It's an individual coverage program. You only get coverage on 65% of your acres compared to 85% when you look at Ark County. It's a complicated program. It's really complicated. As I've talked to FSA, don't know of anyone in this state who has signed up for it. It was not really written for producers in Nebraska. Unless your revenue is drastically different than the average revenue of your county, if you constantly have a hail cloud that tends to stay above your farm all the time, if you're the farm that never gets any rain, you know, it's not necessarily the option for you. It was more so meant for your counties that are up in Montana and the Dakotas. That's really the program that it was meant for. So unless you really want to dig into it, I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about Ark Individual, but that's certainly your choice. It's certainly your choice on all these programs. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We can certainly walk through. If you're interested in participating in the program, we're still going to run this program through the end of March and plug folks' farm bill numbers through. If you have questions on any of that, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we can certainly work through that. I wanted to hit on a couple federal regulations here moving forward quickly. You know, the big one that we talked about for the past year, EPA's Waters of the U.S. issue, the WOTUS regulation. This regulation would basically, in so many words, put EPA in charge of water. All water, everywhere, every place that water falls in congregates, even if it's only after just a heavy rain. You know, hopefully folks are familiar with the regulation. We had some movement on that. Right at the end of last year, Congress was able to cut funding for half the regulation. Basically, the part that was in action as soon as the rule was sent out, was proposed, that dealt with 404 permitting. It basically put NRCS out there as a regulatory agency, stating that farmers needed to follow NRCS guidelines in order to do things that affected waters of the U.S. and anything that dealt with 404 permitting, which is basically taking dirt, it's dredge and fill, taking dirt and putting dirt into a water. So that was something that Congress was able to cut funding for. They were able to get that passed. However, the biggest issue, the 402 permitting, the point source discharge part of the process, it's still out there. It still is a problem. This is the part where you'd have to apply for a permit if you wanted to apply a pesticide, fertilizer, herbicide, whatever you've got, onto a field that has a low-lying area where water congregates only after a heavy rain, which I would say would cover 99.999% of most fields in this state. And so that's still the big issue. Groundwater is still a big issue here, and so we are still trying to work on this. In terms of what's next, we're trying to do the same thing with the 402 side that we did with the 404 side, which is basically put in a budgetary resolution which says EPA cannot use funding to implement that part of the rule, to implement the rule. So we're continuing to work that way. We're still looking at some other legislative options moving forward on maybe really making sure that EPA's focus on this rule is extraordinarily narrow. It's very broad right now. But is there a possibility we could really put in a pinpoint, this is all EPA can do type of regulation that would basically cut agriculture out of the mix completely? So we're still working on some of those things right now. EPA is expected to introduce the final rule by late spring, early summer. We'll keep you all posted on that front. USDA and HHS also released, they're working on some nutritional guidelines. This is, why am I talking about it? Why should you care? This is the regulation that EPA, or excuse me, that USDA and HHS go through that introduced us to the food pyramid, which is now My Plate. They talk about balanced diet type things. It's food standards. It's nutritional guidelines. That's the focus of what it is. Normally, we have some issues with them from time to time. I know the beef industry certainly has when it comes to the amount of red meat that USDA and HHS recommend from time to time. But for the most part, it hasn't been as drag out, knuckle down fight as what this one maybe will appear to be, because of the introduction of possibility of sustainability standards under nutritional guidelines. So what we're seeing is that they have an advisory committee. The advisory committee puts forth some recommendations, and then USDA introduces. You can comment on that report, and then USDA makes a final rule based upon that report. What the committee and the report that they released did was talk about the need to talk about sustainability, environmental sustainability when it comes to nutrition. And the idea of moving away from animal-based diets and focusing more on plant and vegetarian type diets. So this is so outside of the purview of what this regulation, what these guidelines have normally done. This is obviously a big problem for us. And when you look at, as I've dug through the report, they look at sustainability. There's really not a very good definition of sustainability in the report, as there normally never is. They look at international studies when they talk about sustainable diets. They talk about, they don't necessarily get into housing standards, grass-fed, grain-fed, that type of thing, but they do talk about a little bit on one of the studies that they quote is conventional versus organic production, but it's in Italy. And given the pain that it is biotech for biotechnology use in the European Union, it's hard to try to compare apples to apples here when it comes to conventionally produced crops in the United States versus anywhere in Europe and many other developed countries. So it's just a whole bunch of problems, basically. And so the idea of talking about environmental sustainability standards when we're talking about nutritional guidelines is a big problem for us, and so we're going to do more work on this in the very near future, and we're going to urge you all to submit comments, which are due on April 8th yet. So next month, really not that far away, a little over a month away. Comments are due on this particular rule. So I think we're going to try to ask for probably a comment extension because of what this would mean. And we obviously have a problem with it. There are some new changes they made on the nutritional side of things, but that's not really going to be our focus. Our focus is going to be on the sustainability side, on environmental sustainability. Why is that a part of nutritional standards? That's kind of the big problem we have on that side. So stay tuned on that one. We'll have something up on our website to obviously help you submit comments, but again, comments are due on that one on April 8th. Real quick to kind of clear me up here, kind of to finish up here, trade. I want to talk about some things we're working on the trade front because this is probably the big issue we have this year besides the regulatory side of things. We're still trying to push for trade promotion authority for the president. What this is, why it's needed, this allows the administration to work through free trade agreements and get them to Congress for a simple up or down vote. And what does that matter? The reason that fast-track authority, trade promotion authority, has been granted to every single president since the 1970s is because these negotiations are difficult, they're long, they take a long time and through a lot of issues. It takes a long time to work out a lot of the issues that deal with tariffs with one food product over another on the agricultural front. And so what we don't want is 535 members of the House and the Senate being able to amend it, change it, go back and forth, and quite frankly, a lot of countries won't even negotiate with the United States until trade promotion authority is passed because they don't want to have to go right back to the drawing board again as soon as they get an agreement. And so I know that there's some concern when it comes to obviously, we have some concern with the direction that the president has gone on some things, and we're granting him a new piece of, it's not new, a different piece of authority that kind of takes some things out of the hands of Congress. That's not really what this is. It simply allows the president and the trade folks to negotiate a free trade agreement and bring it up to Congress for an up or down vote. We're working on this piece of legislation. It was introduced last year. There are a lot of Democrats that have a problem with it. Unions have problems with free trade agreements to begin with, and so there's a lot of Democrats that have a problem with trade promotion authority legislation. Far-right Republicans are also concerned with trade promotion authority legislation. Again, on this idea that we're granting the president some outside of the Constitution authority, which is not accurate, but it's one of the things that we're kind of playing with. It's kind of a bipartisan problem that we have here, but we're going to continue to try to push it forward. We're to continue to try to push trade promotion authority because of how important trade is, not only to Nebraska agriculture, but American agriculture as a whole. We are so dependent upon trade, upon new customers for our agricultural products. We need to try to get these free trade agreements passed. And what free trade agreements am I talking about? We've got two of them that are in the process, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, you can see there's a number of countries there. The big ones there are Japan and the U.S. That's 40%. These countries here represent 40% of the world's GDP. That's a big portion of the world's economy that's involved in this free trade agreement. And obviously, working out the issues, the agricultural issues mostly between the U.S. and Japan, are the key part of getting this agreement through. Obviously, with beef, with tariffs on any agricultural product, when it comes to automotive issues, those are the things that we still need to work out. And it's really kind of between the United States and Japan working through their issues, and then the other countries will kind of come along with it. So that's probably the biggest one we're looking at, something we're going to try to move forward here this year, hopefully, if we possibly can. The Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, or TTIP. TTIP is between the U.S. and the EU and the European Union, which is, at this point in time, the world's largest commercial relationship. We send trillions of dollars of products over there. They send trillions of dollars back. But the big one here is going to be the agricultural hang-ups that have occurred that you all probably understand when it comes to biotechnology. The EU is not overly enthusiastic about GMO products, about biotech products, and so working through those issues are going to be important. Geographic indicators are a big one. Indicating that one product is from only calling a food product this. The example I like to use is champagne. Champagne is only champagne if it comes from the Champagne region of France. Working out some of those things. That in our mind puts certain products at an advantage over others, and so working through those issues are going to be important. And then certain food identification procedures, animal ID issues, all those are big issue things, and a lot of the problems that we have, and a lot of it comes down to agriculture. So working through those are going to take some time. So this is not really on the immediate, this year type of front, but over the next couple years, we can hopefully work on trying to get TTIP through, as well as hopefully, again, this year working TPP through as well, because, folks, again, agricultural trade is key. Trade is so important to agriculture today. It's so important to your bottom line that trying to find new ways to send our products overseas and make U.S. products competitive. If U.S. farmers and ranchers can produce food in terms of supply and cost the best in the world. I mean, there's no one that can compete with us. And so if we can put our products on an equal playing field as products in other countries, and we are leveling the playing field when it comes to trade, free trade agreements are beneficial, and they're beneficial to agriculture. And so we're going to continue to try to push these forward as well. That's it for me on the federal side. I probably ran through things a little quick, and I probably talked a little long on some things as well, but I'll be willing to take any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. Is there any questions? Please feel free to either raise your hand, we'll unmute your microphone, or you can also type that question either in the chat box or the questions box, and I will share that on with Jordan. Or Jay is also still on, so can ask questions either on a federal, national level, or a state level. Oh, and here's a question that has come in. Okay. This is a question on, this goes back, and this is going to be more for Jay, and I think it goes back to the Sioux County situation. basically said, not sure. Well, I think I'll visit with him. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll visit with him in person on this. More of just a question on how we can address the issue locally up there. So we'll talk more privately on that. Any other questions? Guess I'm not seeing any questions at this point. So again, would like to thank everyone for being on the webinar this morning. And if we certainly appreciate that. If you do have any questions for any of us here, please do not hesitate to send us an email, pick up the phone, give us a call. That's what we are here for. Any final comments from Jordan or Jay? Nope. I do have a question that has come through here real quick before we, Jay, this one is for you. This is, does Farm Bureau have any position on LB 189 and the other bill regarding marijuana use?
No, we have not taken any positions on those bills right now.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm not seeing any other questions to this point. So, Jay, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just appreciate everybody joining on. Just one final plug. Please, if you're given a chance, talk to your senator about property tax relief. We need your help. This is good. It's going to be a tough road to sled here, and we need everyone pitching in. So, any help you can provide talking to your senator, we'd certainly appreciate it. Okay. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and we have another webinar scheduled for a couple of weeks. That one is going to be at noon, so please feel free to register for that webinar, and we will talk to you then. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day.